Welcome to the Shared Governance Training course. Some of these slides I will push through because they were for the in-person training course. My name is Jamie Tennyson. I am your Pathway to Excellence coordinator, and this presentation was adapted from a PowerPoint that was sent to me from Centure Health and is used with permission. Initial author was Missy Russell. What I hope that you learn throughout this presentation is that we figure out what shared governance is and what it's not. And then how are you going to, as a unit practice council chair, co-chair, or secretary, how you're going to lead. And I'm going to talk about the different roles between the unit practice council and what your manager or director does. I want to help you identify and prioritize and then set goals that are aligned with the community hospital mission, vision, and values. And I want to help you identify resources to be as successful as possible in your role. Of creating decisions into the professional environment that happen through a shared decision-making process. So we want you to feel empowered to drive professional change through partnership, equity, accountability, and ownership at the point of service. So what is shared governance? It is knowledge-based. It is directed by the point of care. It is intended to be directly communicative between the frontline staff. Of course, high staff input, and it is supposed to integrate equity, accountability, and authority for staff and management. So this is not self-governance, and it's not traditional governance or hierarchical governance. This is a shared governance where we're sort of melding the two between a top-down approach and a almost like an anarchy, right? So we want it to be synergistic. We want for you guys to be able to come into work and have an environment where you have synergistic workflows and goals, and there's good communication. And then cohesive goals and collegiality and collaboration are all tenets of shared governance. What it is not is something that I alluded to in the previous slide, which is position-based and hierarchical. It is also not distant from the point of care, so the people who are touching the patient are in charge of what it looks like to be at the bedside. It is not a top-down communication. The opposite of the previous, where there's limited staff input and where people are not engaged. It does not separate responsibility with managers being accountable. It is not intended to create a we versus they work environment or have a divided goal and purpose. Our purpose of all shared governance is to have the patient at the forefront. So if you look at our mission, vision, values, that is very evident that is, we are very patient and family focused. Of course, we want to take very good care of our workforce, but also keeping in mind that our patients and their outcomes come first. They are also not, these initiatives, activities that happen in shared governance are not intended to be independent activities. So this is really supposed to be a time where we all come together and we talk about things, we share the work burden, not where your chairperson brings a topic, they do all of the work, they manage the agenda and the minutes, and they're the only person who is actively engaged. So it is also not supposed to be independent of our other interprofessional governances. If we have a committee that is handling a medication issue, that is not something that we would want to institute independent of that committee. We would want to have good collaboration and communication with what we are struggling with on the nursing side. And then if we present a solution and it's approved, that is wonderful. If it takes a little bit of back and forth and conversation, that is also a really big goal of what shared governance is supposed to look like. So why do we do shared governance? When shared governance is done well, it increases the satisfaction of the staff and actually of our patients, increases your engagement. There is tons of evidence out there that talks about having increased staff engagement leads to increased retention, and being able to have your voice heard in a feasible and meaningful way is incredibly it's incredibly important to you, per the research, also per conversations that I've had with you. It decreases costs because you guys are the ones who are going into those rooms, you are taking care of those patients, you're managing the use of materials, all of those things. It increases quality and it improves outcomes. All of these 5 topics are just like completely embedded in what the evidence says about shared governance, especially very effective shared governance. This is our current shared governance model. So if you'll notice, in the center is the patient, and we partner as the hospital with our patients. Then the 5 circles around are our values and our pillars for the hospital. And then each one of our shared governance councils has been placed into one of those areas. This is not a comprehensive list of every single committee that meets at Community Hospital. What it is a list and a visual representation of all the different places that could potentially impact nursing. Because remember, here we're talking about nurses and nursing specifically. So these are those are the councils that are listed. So earlier I had talked about medication. If you'll notice, under service line partnerships, there's a P&T committee. That is pharmacy and therapeutics. Our nursing practice improvement council took a request of getting a lidocaine solution as part of the EMAR for our patients who receive potassium infusions on peripheral IVs. And our wonderful chair, Amanda, took it to our pharmacy and therapeutics committee. There was a little bit of conversation as far as what do the providers want it to look like. There are physicians and providers who sit on that committee, pharmacists, I think infection prevention. It is an integral part of how we function. So that has been that's in the preliminary phases of being approved and being started as part of practice at Community Hospital for Nurses. This slide is completely crucial to the conversation of shared governance at Community Hospital. When we're talking about unit-based councils and nursing shared governance, this idea stands that we don't function outside of our manager or director, but we do sort of have our own lanes per se. I love the use of the Venn diagram here because it shows that there is some overlap. This is probably not completely true to how much overlap there really is between either a unit-based council and a manager, or a nursing shared governance council and let's say nursing and operational leadership. Probably the middle section where we meet and collaborate on things is maybe a little bit bigger, but the point of this slide is that unit-based councils really focus on standards of practice. That is their scope. And then specialty, their specialty. So if you're in ICU, you're really focusing on what is best practice for ICU or interventional radiology or cath lab, surgery, the list goes on. So what does evidence say we should be doing in order to be operating at the highest level of our scope of practice as nurses and as care partners or as techs? Really focusing on practice review and then quality, right? Because quality is what tells us how our patients are going to have the very best outcomes, and then competency of ourselves and of our staff. So your manager really, let me go back to the unit-based council. This is directed by your unit-based council. You have a list of accountabilities and responsibilities that we'll talk about a little bit later. And that really sets an outline for the scope of what you can and should be tackling. And then your manager really focuses on those, first and foremost, of being a collaborator with you. So if you guys bring your manager, director, something like you've hit a complete barrier where you have taken on a task, you have done all of the things that you think that you can do, and now you sort of need a leader to come beside you and talk about why you're hitting this barrier, or maybe just remove the barrier for you completely, or talk about why the barrier exists and if it can't be moved, why that is true. Of course, HR, materials, finance systems, but again, remember that there's that overlap in the middle. So a lot of you have done some really great things with materials management. The value analysis committee is back up and meeting again. And I know several of you have either presented or attended that. And it's completely crucial. If you see something that you have seen somewhere else where it could be a product could be exchanged for something else that might be cheaper, or maybe it's a little more expensive, but you'll use less of it, because you guys, again, are at the front of how do we truly manage cost without completely taking the quality of what we're giving to our patients, or having that suffer. And then your manager, of course, sort of heads up recognition, but you guys are, as unit-based councils or unit practice councils, you guys are integral to recognizing each other, recognizing the departments and disciplines around you. This is 100%. I know it's on the manager side, but it's also a very big part of what you guys can do to impact your own place that you work. And then, as I talked about in the beginning, your manager also removes barriers. So this is just a really short overview, and the waters are always muddy in the middle, but I think that collaboration is absolutely the key. This slide is, I'm going to refer to the shared drive or the resources folder or the nursing shared governance folder throughout this presentation. So this particular slide is just giving you the direct address of the folder of which I am talking. So the things that you are going to find in here are things like agenda templates and minutes templates, lots of templates, the stoplight template that we'll talk about later, your action plan templates. Again, all of those templates are rooted in evidence as far as making sure that we are taking the things that we say, okay, we need to have action on this, or we need to do A, B, and C, or Mary, you're going to do this, and um, Jessica, you're going to do this. Just helps you organize those things a little bit better. So those are all found in the Nursing Shared Governance resources right here in that folder. So the next part that I want to talk about, most of you already have established charters. That is, this was a completely foreign idea to me prior to taking over this role, but I have found them to be very helpful. So the first thing that I want to tell you about this is that it is really important not to overthink this, but your charter helps you establish your purpose. So if you go online onto Lucidoc and you search, you can search mine, you can search the Pathway Charter. And I think that that one probably gives you, of course I did it, so I think that it gives you the most concise view of what a charter can look like. But there are several charters that live on Lucidoc, and it's really helpful to be able to know what our different committees, councils, task forces are doing. Are they going to be long-standing committees? Are they committees that will be dissolved after a task is complete? A unit practice council would, in theory, it would never dissolve, because units are always moving, they're always changing, they're always, new people are coming in, new practices are coming in as far as having best practice in your unit. So your charter should not say that you will dissolve after your responsibilities are complete, because that's not, they will never be complete. In January, with your new unit practice leadership and membership, you are supposed to go into your charter, wherever it lives. If it lives on the K drive, mine lives in Lucidoc because I house house-wide information, but for your unit practice council, it may live on the shared nursing, shared governance drive. And please put your information in those drives so that I can help keep quality updated on what you're doing, that I can help keep Joe and Ben and leadership updated on what you're doing, and so that your director and manager can go in and see if there are things that they need to, that they can identify barriers and help you work through those. My next point is that I always want you to use the responsibilities document to help guide you when you're choosing your goals. What this does is make sure that you are working within the unit practice scope. So what I don't want to happen, it's very off-putting to other disciplines, and it would be to us as well, right, as nurses or techs or nursing support, to have a different discipline come to you and say, we have this problem and the only way to fix it is for you to do your job in a different way. That doesn't feel very collaborative. And you might have identified an issue that requires collaboration, but it is just very important for us to really focus on our own units and the people who work there and our licensures and our own scopes. So if you use that document, your risk of going outside of your scope in the UPC is much smaller. So we're really getting into the nitty-gritty now of what a UPC looks like, what are the roles of the different leadership people, and what are the roles of the members of the UPC. So our chair and co-chair really work as a collaborative team. The only position that must be a nurse is a chair position. The co-chair, secretary, and any of the membership can be filled by any discipline or licensure that works in the specific unit. So it is important that people who participate in a unit practice council actually work in that unit. So the chair and co-chair are very process focused. They're the ones who set your ground rules. They keep your discussion on track. They're really the person who makes sure that our content is good and the process of the meeting and the process of workflow is going to be good and it's going to work. And then they also have the really fun job of facilitating and making sure that everyone who comes to the meeting gets to participate. They also have the fun job of making sure that everyone who comes to the meeting is participating. So this is not a passive participation. Unit practice councils really need to be actively participated in. It is one meeting a month, depending on how the structure of your unit practice council is. And it is not something that you can come and just passively listen to. The members are very content focused. So whatever we're talking about, we're hoping that you're going to give input, ideas, opinions, bring whatever experience and expertise that you have in healthcare on your unit. Maybe even it's not in healthcare, maybe it's in something completely different, but you learned something that you know is really going to help whatever content discussion we're having. And then, of course, listening to each other. So making sure that there's actually a challenge in Virgin Pulse, which plug, Virgin Pulse is our current wellness portal. And there's a challenge to make sure that we're listening to each other prior to responding. It's very interesting. And that is part of your role as a member. And then, of course, part of communication using questions to clarify and understand, and being a part of team always includes valuing the participation of the other people who are there. Here at Community Hospital, we also have the role of a secretary. So this is it's almost kind of similar to what the recorder does in cardiac arrest. You record ideas, information, decisions, opinions, and actions. If you'll notice, that actions is in all caps. The reason it's in all caps is because this is one of the main reasons that councils, especially infant councils, lose traction on change. If we are not keeping track of actions that are decided in these meetings, like I was talking about in the previous slide, then we will not be able to keep traction. So we won't be able to keep moving forward if people are coming into a meeting and saying, oh, I completely forgot that I was supposed to do that. I'll bring it to the next meeting and then to the next meeting. And it just goes on like that. So the secretary job is very, very important. They don't edit without checking. So one of the practices that I have really encouraged a lot of our secretaries who are learning to do is something that's very helpful for me. And it includes, when you are in a meeting, actually taking your notes in front of people. So most of us are using Zoom right now, or we're familiar with Zoom. So putting your agenda up on the screen and then taking your notes on an agenda or on a minutes template, so that everybody can see what you're editing and what you're typing in. That really helps to make sure that, of course, it creates accountability, and it creates a really simple way to have immediate feedback on what notes are being taken. And then, of course, the secretary is a member. They participate in content. And I love this sentence that I did not create, but Misty did, and says, resist temptation to wield the power of the pen. It is very important to recognize that the secretary is very trusted, and that they are not there to editorialize. They are truly there as like a recorder in a scenario where they are just in a cardiac arrest, where they are just taking down what is actually happening in the meeting. So I apologize. It's hard to read this slide, but This is the agenda template that I would request that your committees use. So this is specific to unit practice councils, and it's in the resources folder that I mentioned before. The reason that I request that you guys use this or something very similar to this is because the content on this is very important. Um, our our values are used as the numbers, and it also has a little piece down here at the bottom that talks about what went well in this meeting, what do we need to do differently as we move forward. Please remember that we all need to have as much grace as possible for each other as we are working through nursing shared governance, and that will continue no matter if we are the most schooled and effective team of shared governance people. We will always make mistakes. We will always need grace for each other. So please use this as much as possible. It also is an overview of what you find in the responsibilities document that I mentioned before. This is a screenshot of the minutes template. So this is all of these templates. Many of these templates were created by Michelle White in administration. She does wonderful work, and this has been really helpful for me. If you have never taken minutes, you will soon become familiar with the fact that it is not everyone's strong suit, and it certainly wasn't mine. But again, if you'll notice on here, the action item is on here. We start with our purpose and mission. So Wendy Engel, who was the Professional Growth and Development Chair, does this thing that I love. She always starts her meetings with, what is the purpose and mission of our council? And she just reads it straight off the charter. It's very helpful. It really puts everything into perspective. Why are you there? And helps you use all of the time that you have in that meeting to focus on why you're there. So this template is also found in the resources folder. This action planning tool is just that. If you are working on a project and you're really struggling to keep traction, this is a really great tool to use. And you can pull everything from your minutes template that is an action item and just put it on here. Then it helps to make it simple to keep whoever is responsible, to keep tabs on what action items you have. And it is fairly project specific. So if you have a couple of projects going, it can just help you keep track of what you have that's outstanding, and maybe identify some things that are causing barriers for you that make it really hard for you to keep going. So when we're making decisions, the bylaws talk about making as many decisions as possible within these councils by consensus. So consensus is that everyone agrees that the decision that is made is the correct decision and that we're going to move forward with that. If that is not able to happen, then there is a voting mechanism, and you can vote, but we always want the goal to be for us to make decisions based on consensus. So as you're going through decisions, maybe you'll come up against a decision that is you're very split, your council is split. We want to use the fist to 5 maybe process. So if you are a complete no, and you can't raise your hand and vote yes on something. So that's what the image is supposed to be, is raising your hand to vote yes on something. If you are a fist, or if someone on your team is a fist, then you would want to explore their concerns. You would want to encourage them to explore their concerns. And then have a conversation about what would it take for you to get on board with this? How can we look at the data to make sure that we are making the best decision? And would that help you reconsider your point of view? When you have someone who is a 2 or a 3, ask what concerns do you have? And then what would it take? What's it going to take to get you to a 4 or a 5? Are there interventions that we need to be doing? Is there something very specific that if we changed one thing in this process improvement or in our approach, would that get you there? And then when you have enough 4s and 5s, then you have enough support to move to the next step. This is another resource for you guys, and I think that it is also kind of a crucial thing for you guys to use. So it is, we use this for leadership rounding. Another plug, make sure that if you haven't had a chance to look at the e-news and check out the stoplight report for leadership rounding, this is the template that we use, and it's very helpful. So green these are complete things that you have done. So say you created or you worked on a process for how you admit people to the unit. And you did it, and you are now onto your 30, 60, 90 day revisit. You would put your goal down there where it says details on how the goal was met, and that's what you would do. For your yellow things, these are obviously going to be your things in progress, and it is really important to have a couple of details on the progress of the goal. So how are we getting to this thing? If you are having barriers, but it's not a red, which is can't complete at this time, put those barriers in there on the work in progress. Helps you identify barriers if you're actually thinking through the process, and hopefully overcome those barriers. And then the red line is the can't complete at this time, and here's why. So you'll want to put, it's pretty self-explanatory. You want to put why the goal can't be met, and then be specific about what the barriers are. If it's truly a can't complete at this time, but you know that maybe in 6 to 9 months, you're going to have one of the barriers is going to be eliminated, and you'll be able to go back and look at that. Say it's budget. That would be you would want to put on there, can't do this because of the budget at this time. Timeline would be to review at next year's budget review. The reason that I want you to use this or something very similar to this is because I want whoever comes in after you or after your chairperson to be able to look at this information in a very simple way and be able to pick up where you left off. Let's talk about SMART goals. So when we are determining our goals, we want to make sure that we are using the SMART goal format. I am encouraging everyone to use this because it's pretty simple. It's a really simple way to create goals and make sure that we're not tackling things that are so huge that we're not going to be able to accomplish them, or setting unrealistic goals for ourselves. The format for this is on the K Drive in that folder that I alluded to earlier, that I showed you on the PowerPoint earlier. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-related. So these are all versions of different words of SMART goals everywhere that I found on the internet, but they're the ones that I'm going to use, and they're also the ones that are on the format that's in the K Drive. We want our goals to be specific, so we're not going to say something like, make all of our nursing team better, right? We would we would choose something very specific, like um, say we're going to talk about the admission of new patients into our area. So we're going to find a specific area for improvement. And as you go through these goals and as you go through the process, you'll realize that even that goal is probably almost too big, and you're going to zoom in on the thing that is maybe causing problems. And then measurable. So quantify or at least suggest an indicator of progress. So if what we're talking about in admitting new patients to our unit is their, I don't know, their ability to understand um, something about the admission process, you would want to try and figure out how you could track that progress. Attainable. We want to make sure that our results can be realistically achieved, and this does include resources. So if you have to take budget into account, you have to know if this is a project that can consume some money or if it has to be budget neutral. And that is something that is a little bit new for us. Really being down and dirty in how much our budget really impacts what we can do. And always, I will say that patient safety is incredibly important. And the more we understand about how finances work and about how our healthcare system and our specific hospital works, the more we can start to build cases for increasing patient safety and quality. But just coming in and saying we need to do this because this is the way we want to do it is much less powerful than saying we need this specific amount of money or this can be a budget neutral project because of these things that we found in recent published resources. And these are feasible things that we can do to really impact our patient outcomes. And then relevant, make sure that you're specific about why it matters. So in the admission process, you want to talk about it matters that the patient understands, let's say that they understand how to use their call light, and they understand that they have to call to get as needed pain medications. So we would want to be that specific when we're talking about our SMART goal. And then time related. So deadlines are very helpful and can be really hard for people who are like myself, who are newer to leadership roles, but they are completely crucial and actually really help projects move forward. So you can see in there that the SMART goal template is hyperlinked. It is hyperlinked out into the K Drive where you will find that template. So this slide is in here because when we're in person, I want to give people an opportunity to think about what are some of the issues or concerns or just things that you think can be streamlined as part of a shared governance model, as something that we're coming together to do. So if you're watching this remotely, I just want you to think about what are those opportunities? What are the things, whether it's a pipe dream or it seems like a pipe dream, or it's something that you think, man, if we just change this one thing, it would completely change the whole workflow, or it would completely change the practice of how we do things to reflect either best practice or something that is going to provide better outcomes for our patients, or it's going to make our lives a little bit easier as we are at work. I wanted to focus on a couple of the resources that you have that you may not think about as you're either going through a project or having a unit practice council meeting or just in your everyday work. We have a really wonderful professional development team. Reach out to them. Make sure that we are being very aware of the fact that they give education to the entire facility. So, as much commitment as we're asking of them when we ask them to help us with something or to create a resource for us, just please be sure to reciprocate that commitment back to them, and utilize whatever they have come up with, or attend a session that you ask them to create. Just have that kind of collegial respect for whatever professional development team we have. There is also a Pathway to Excellence intranet site. So if you go to the homepage, and then on the left-hand main menu, it's in alphabetical order. Click on that, and that talks a lot about what our practices were at time of submission, and then also talks about a couple of things that are future state, so things that we want to see come to fruition. One of the other cool things that I think about the Pathway to Excellence site is that it actually lists out most of the EOPs, which is an element of performance. And they're not all on there, but if you have a question about, okay, what is it that we're actually writing to? What is it that what is it that we're doing? You can either reach out to me, or you can go onto the intranet site and do a little bit of research on your own. The clinical improvement team is incredibly helpful, especially when it comes to all things quality or clinical improvement related. So please reach out to them for process improvement. Projects are actually they're very interested in those. They're very interested in making sure that we are doing process improvement correctly. And I mean that when it's done correctly, it can be much more fruitful. So make sure you're letting them know if you're doing a true practice improvement, process improvement, quality improvement project. Reach out to them so that they can help you identify and relieve barriers and get you resources you may need, etc. Patient experience is a great resource that sometimes we don't think about. Your Pathway to Excellence coordinator, whether it's myself or someone else, please reach out. And then, of course, your nursing leadership, administration team, managers, directors, reach out to them. Let them know if there is something that is just continually coming up and seems to never be communicated why.